She was the ghost in the Brown family's carefully constructed reality show, the invisible fifth wife whose presence was never acknowledged on camera, but whose existence would ultimately shatter the very foundation of the sister wives' empire. Her name wasn't on the family's roster, but her influence was more potent than any of the legally or spiritually bound wives. This secret nanny didn't just care for the children. She exposed the hidden truth that had been festering for years. Within the sprawling polygamist family that preached unity and shared sacrifice, a secret monogamous monarchy was already in power, with a king and queen ruling over their loyal and increasingly disillusioned subjects. This is the story of how one unseen employee blew the lid off a decade of deception and revealed the lie at the heart of the Brown family's carefully curated brand. If you're ready to uncover the truth that TLC didn't want you to see, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to COCO Gossip, and ring the bell for all the latest updates on your favorite reality shows. You won't want to miss a single second of this deep dive. To understand the sheer magnitude of the nanny scandal, we have to rewind and immerse ourselves in the world the Brown family meticulously built for the cameras. For over a decade, the core tenet of their brand, the very essence of their sales pitch for polygamy, was a concept of radical self-sufficiency. They were a tribe, a cohesive unit, a bustling cooperative organism where the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. The narrative they sold to the world, and perhaps to themselves, was one of a family that didn't need outside help because they were the help. With 4 mothers, 4 dedicated, loving, and capable women, and a seemingly endless supply of older children, the family was portrayed as a self-sustaining ecosystem. They were the all-hands-on-deck family, a living, breathing testament to the supposed benefits of the principle. The image was powerful, almost utopian. We saw Mary, the first wife, initially contributing to the family pot through her work and later navigating her own path, but always presented as part of the maternal collective. We saw Janelle, the pragmatic second wife, the breadwinner who worked tirelessly outside the home, her income a critical pillar supporting the entire 19-plus member family. Her contribution was not just financial, it was a testament to the idea that a plural wife could have a career while her children were cared for within the family unit. And then there was Christine, the third wife, the designated homemaker, the nurturing heart of the family. For years, Christine was the primary caregiver for not just her own 6 children, but for all the children. She was the one who managed the bustling household, who cooked enormous meals, who homeschooled, who kissed scraped knees, and who provided the constant, steady presence of a mother when other mothers were working or otherwise occupied. The older children, in turn, were presented as built-in babysitters, mentors, and helpers, learning responsibility and contributing to the family's well-being. This was the system. This was the promise of polygamy as presented by the Browns. A world where no mother was ever truly alone, where the burden of child-rearing was shared, and where the village it takes to raise a child was built right into the family structure. The very idea of needing to hire outside help was not just impractical, it was antithetical to their entire ideology. It would be an admission of failure, a public acknowledgement that their grand experiment, the very lifestyle they were championing on national television, was flawed. Why would a family with 4 mothers need a nanny? It was a question that, for the longest time, seemed absurd, a question no one even thought to ask because the answer seemed so self-evident. They didn't need a nanny because they had each other. They were sister wives. This public image was not just a passive portrayal, it was an active marketing strategy. Kody Brown, the patriarch at the center of this universe, frequently waxed poetic about the beauty of this cooperative model. He spoke of the synergy, the teamwork, the built-in support system that made their lives not just possible but superior. He positioned himself as the coach of a winning team, a CEO of a thriving family corporation where every member had a vital role. Christine, in particular, was often lauded for her dedication to the children. She was the glue that held the domestic sphere together. Her sacrifice and her tireless work were presented as the ultimate expression of her commitment to the family and to the principle of plural marriage. She wasn't just raising her own kids. She was raising Kody's kids, all of them. This was her sacred duty, her contribution to the eternal family unit. The family's first book, Becoming Sister Wives, The Story of an Unconventional Marriage, further cemented this image. It was filled with anecdotes about their cooperative lifestyle, their struggles, and their triumphs, all reinforcing the central theme of self-reliance and shared responsibility. They were pioneers, trailblazers, showing the world that polygamy wasn't about subjugation, but about cooperation and love. The need for a nanny would have been a crack in this carefully polished facade, a glaring contradiction to the narrative they had so successfully sold. But behind the carefully edited scenes and the talking head interviews, a different reality was beginning to take shape. The move from the single large home in Lehi, Utah, to the 4 separate houses on the cul-de-sac in Las Vegas was the first sign of a seismic shift. The physical separation began to erode the practical unity they once had. While they still presented themselves as one family, the logistics of their lives became increasingly fragmented. Yet, the expectation of shared motherhood remained, especially for Christine. When the family made its most ambitious and ultimately catastrophic move to Flagstaff, Arizona, these cracks widened into chasms. The dream of building one large home on their Coyote Pass property remained just that, a dream. Instead, they were scattered across a new city in separate homes, further isolating the wives and their children from one another. It was in this fractured landscape of Flagstaff that the deception truly began to take root. While the audience was still being fed the narrative of the one big happy family, a secret was being kept, a secret that would ultimately rewrite the entire history of their public persona. Quietly, without any fanfare or on-camera acknowledgement, Kody and his 4th wife, Robyn, made a decision that directly contradicted everything the family claimed to stand for. They hired a full-time nanny. This wasn't a casual babysitter for the occasional date night. This was a paid employee, a woman who came into their home day after day to do the very job that the sister wives were supposed to provide for each other. And for a significant period, this fact was meticulously hidden from the viewers. The cameras would pan across Robyn's home, showing her life with her 5 children, but the nanny remained an invisible presence, a ghost in the machine of their reality TV show. The hypocrisy of this decision is staggering when you consider the context of what the other wives were doing at the time. Christine, who had spent the better part of 2 decades as the primary caregiver for the entire brood, was still, even in Flagstaff, fulfilling that role for Robyn's children. Insider reports that have circulated for years, which TLC has never addressed, suggest that Christine was the one watching Robyn's younger children, Solomon and Ariella, during the day, while Robyn and Kody were otherwise occupied. She was, for all intents and purposes, their unpaid nanny, continuing to provide the free childcare that was the bedrock of their family's economic and social model. Meanwhile, Janelle, ever the pragmatist, was working. Her income was still a vital part of the family's pooled finances, the very finances that were now being used to pay for a secret employee. The family's money, the money Janelle was earning, the money Christine was saving them by providing free childcare, was being funneled into a private expense for Kody and Robyn, paying for a service that the sister wives themselves were not only capable of providing, but were, in fact, already providing. This secret arrangement wasn't just a financial betrayal, it was a deep personal slight. It sent a clear message to the other wives: your contribution is not enough, your sacrifice is not valued. We require something more, something better, something you are not providing. For Christine, who had built her identity within the family as the child-rearing wife, this was a particularly cruel blow. It rendered her primary role, her life's work, obsolete in the eyes of her husband and her sister wife. But the full extent of this deception, its true insidious nature, would not be fully understood until the world was plunged into the chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was during this time of global crisis that the secret nanny would transform from a symbol of hypocrisy into a weapon of control. The arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic threw the already fractured Brown family into a state of unprecedented turmoil. For Kody, the pandemic became the ultimate justification for a set of draconian rules that would further isolate the family members from one another. He presented himself as a benevolent dictator, a patriarch making the tough decisions necessary to protect his large and vulnerable family. His protocols were famously, or perhaps infamously, strict. He demanded that the family members who interacted with the outside world, particularly Janelle's older sons, Garrison and Gabriel, cease all social contact, quit their jobs, and effectively live in a bubble if they wanted to see him. He preached about the importance of wiping down mail, sanitizing groceries, and maintaining extreme social distance. The narrative he pushed was one of paramount safety, of a father willing to do anything to shield his loved ones from a deadly virus. On the surface, his concern might have seemed understandable, if a bit extreme. But as the weeks turned into months, a glaring contradiction emerged, a hypocrisy so blatant that it could not be ignored. While Kody was forbidding his own children from visiting each other's homes, while he was lecturing Janelle and Christine about their perceived lack of caution, an outside party was being granted free and frequent access to the inner sanctum, Kody and Robyn's home. That party was the secret nanny and, as it was later revealed, her husband. This was the moment the lie became undeniable. Kody's rules were not about safety, they were about control. They were not about protecting the entire family, they were about protecting the bubble of his preferred family unit. The nanny, an outsider with her own household and her own potential exposures, was deemed safe enough to be in daily close contact with Robyn's young children, while Kody's own flesh and blood, his sons, were treated as pariahs, as unacceptable risks. The cruelty of this double standard cannot be overstated. Janelle's sons were faced with an impossible choice: their livelihoods and social lives or a relationship with their father. Christine's daughter, Isabel, had to undergo major back surgery in another state without her father present because Kody refused to break his quarantine to travel with her. He cited the risk of exposure, the need to protect the larger family, yet the nanny and her husband were coming and going from his home, a risk he was perfectly willing to accept. The message was loud and clear. The needs and desires of Kody and Robyn's nuclear family superseded the needs of everyone else. The nanny was not just an employee, she was essential personnel for what was increasingly looking like a separate, privileged family unit operating under its own set of rules. The other wives and their children were relegated to the status of distant relatives, their access to the patriarch contingent on their absolute obedience to a set of rules that he himself did not consistently apply. This wasn't a polygamist family pulling together in a crisis. This was a functional monogamous family with 3 other families orbiting it, their connections growing more tenuous by the day. This glaring hypocrisy became a major source of tension and resentment, brewing just beneath the surface. For the audience, it was a period of intense frustration as they watched Kody's seemingly irrational and cruel behavior. But for the wives, particularly Christine and Janelle, it was a slow, agonizing realization. The man they had committed their lives to, the family they had sacrificed for, was operating on a foundation of lies and double standards. The pandemic didn't create the cracks in the Brown family. It simply exposed them, stripping away the carefully constructed facade and revealing the rotting structure beneath. And at the heart of that rot was the secret of the nanny, a secret that was about to be dragged, kicking and screaming into the light. The stage was set for a confrontation, not with fists and fury, but with a single, devastating question that would echo through the fandom and signal the beginning of the end. The question that broke the family was about to be asked, and the Brown family would never be the same. The tipping point, the moment the years of simmering resentment and quiet betrayal finally boiled over, did not happen in a dramatic screaming match. It happened in a moment of pure, unadulterated frustration. A moment of such raw clarity that it became an iconic touchstone in the history of Sister Wives. The scene is forever etched in the minds of viewers. Christine, having reached the end of her rope after years of feeling marginalized, unheard, and unvalued, is speaking directly to the camera in a confessional interview. Her face is a canvas of exhaustion and disbelief. She has just been recounting the endless list of Kody's COVID rules, the hypocrisy, the isolation, the fact that her children can't see their father, but a paid employee can. The injustice of it all hangs heavy in the air, and then she pauses. The frustration momentarily gives way to a look of genuine, bewildered inquiry. She looks straight down the barrel of the lens, as if pleading with the entire world for an answer, and with a staccato rhythm that emphasizes each word like a hammer blow, she asks the question that would detonate the family's carefully crafted image. What does the nanny do? In that moment, the entire facade of the Brown family crumbled. That single 4-word question was the key that unlocked Pandora's box of their dysfunction. It was so much more than a simple inquiry about an employee's job description. It was a primal scream of a woman who had given her entire adult life to a system that had just been exposed as a sham. Let's break down why this question was so explosive. Firstly, it was a direct challenge to the family's core identity. Christine, the woman who had raised a dozen children, who had been the stay-at-home mother for the entire clan, was asking what a nanny could possibly be doing in Robyn's home that she or the other mothers couldn't. It was an indictment of the very principle of sisterhood they preached. If you have 3 other mothers at your disposal, what on earth do you need a nanny for? The question hung in the air, unanswered, because there was no logical answer that aligned with the family's public philosophy. Secondly, it was a cry against the profound inequity that had come to define the family. Christine wasn't just asking about the nanny's tasks. She was asking why her own labor, her years of unpaid devoted service, was suddenly deemed insufficient for Robyn's children. She was asking why the family's pooled resources, which she and Janelle had contributed to so significantly, were being used to pay someone to do the job she had done for free for decades. It was a question about value, about respect, about her own worth within the family she had helped build. A persistent theory that has gained traction among insider circles is that the nanny's duties extended far beyond simple childcare. There are whispers that she was also a personal assistant, a housekeeper, a cook, and a general household manager for Kody and Robyn. If this is true, it paints an even more damning picture. It means that while Christine was struggling to maintain her own household and Janelle was working to earn a living, Kody and Robyn had used family funds to create a fully staffed, comfortable, monogamous lifestyle for themselves, a lifestyle completely alien to the other wives. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, Christine's question exposed the lie of Kody's COVID protocols. By asking what the nanny does, she was implicitly asking, what does she do that is so essential that she is worth the risk of bringing COVID into your home, a risk you are not willing to take for your own children? It blew apart Kody's defense that his rules were about safety. If safety were the primary concern, a non-essential employee would be the first person to be cut off, not the last. The nanny's continued presence proved that Kody's motivations were not about health. They were about convenience, comfort, and the preservation of his preferred lifestyle with his favored wife. The question revealed that Kody and Robyn were not making sacrifices like the rest of the family. They were outsourcing their burdens while demanding that everyone else shoulder theirs in silence. The unraveling that followed this question was swift and brutal. It was the moment the audience, and more importantly the other wives, could no longer deny the truth. The illusion of a unified, equitable, polygamist family was shattered, and in its place stood the stark reality of a dysfunctional hierarchy. Kody and Robyn were not just part of a family, they were the family. They were the royal couple, the king and queen, and the other wives and their children were the court, their relevance and value determined by their usefulness to the throne. Janelle, the stoic and logical one, could no longer ignore the financial and emotional injustice. Christine, the heart of the family, was finally forced to confront the fact that her love and sacrifice were not reciprocated. The nanny wasn't just a nanny, she was the living embodiment of betrayal. She was the invisible fifth wife, the one who received a paycheck instead of a spiritual marriage certificate, the one who was hired to do the job that the sister wives were supposed to do for love. And in doing so, she exposed Robyn not as a sister wife in a plural marriage, but as a de facto monogamous wife, a queen with hired help, living a life of privilege paid for by the very women she was supposed to be in partnership with. The question, what does the nanny do, was the spark, and the entire house of cards that was the Brown family was about to go up in flames. The discovery was made, the truth was out, and a confrontation was now inevitable. The king's secret was out and his kingdom was about to crumble. The fallout from Christine's televised question was immediate and intense. The question echoed across social media, becoming a rallying cry for viewers who had long suspected the deep-seated inequity within the Brown family. The pressure mounted, and it became impossible for the show's producers, and for Kody and Robyn themselves, to ignore the elephant, or rather, the nanny, in the room. They were forced to address the issue on camera, and the resulting confrontation became one of the most revealing and infuriating sequences in the show's history. This was the moment for Kody and Robyn to explain, to justify, to rationalize a decision that seemed to fly in the face of everything they claimed to believe. Their defense, however, was not one of logic or contrition. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, deflection, and nonsensical excuses that only served to fuel the outrage from both the other wives and the audience. Kody's reaction was particularly telling. When confronted with the simple question of why they needed a nanny when there were 3 other mothers in the family, he didn't respond with a calm explanation. He responded with rage. His face contorted, his voice rose, and he began to sputter and deflect. This wasn't the measured response of a patriarch explaining a logical family decision. This was the desperate, cornered defense of a king whose secret privilege had been exposed to the world. He attempted to frame the nanny as a necessity, not a luxury, vaguely referencing Robyn's needs without ever providing a concrete reason why those needs couldn't be met by the existing family structure. He tried to pivot, turning the conversation back onto Christine and Janelle, implying that their lack of adherence to his COVID protocols was the real problem. It was a classic gaslighting technique. When your actions are indefensible, attack the character and judgment of the person questioning you. Robyn's defense was equally weak, though delivered with a softer, more passive-aggressive touch. She played the victim, suggesting that she was being unfairly targeted and that the other wives simply didn't understand the demands of her life. She offered vague justifications, implying that she needed help because Kody was away so often. A statement dripping with irony, given that his absence from the other wives' homes was the primary source of their pain. She failed to provide a single compelling reason why, in a family with 19 children and 4 mothers, she alone required paid outside assistance. The closest they came to a real explanation was a half-hearted suggestion that the nanny was also helping with the children's schooling, but even this fell flat. Christine had homeschooled the family's children for years. Why was that no longer a viable option? Every excuse they offered only dug the hole deeper, highlighting their isolation from the family's supposed core principles. An exclusive theory that has been debated fiercely in online forums based on subtle clues and offhand comments from the show is that the nanny was not a new addition in Flagstaff, but had been a part of Kody and Robyn's life for much longer, possibly even since their time in Las Vegas. This theory suggests that the family's financial strain and the move to Flagstaff simply made the secret impossible to keep any longer. If this is true, the deception is far deeper and more calculated than a simple pandemic-era decision. It suggests a long-term pattern of Kody and Robyn creating a separate, more privileged life for themselves, using family money to build their own monogamous bubble while publicly performing the role of dedicated polygamists. This would mean that for years, Christine and Janelle were not just being lied to, they were actively funding a lifestyle for Robyn that they themselves were denied. The impact of this disastrous confrontation on Christine and Janelle was palpable. You could see the pain, the betrayal, and the dawning realization on their faces. For Janelle, the financial implications were a slap in the face. She had always been the family's financial workhorse, the one who crunched the numbers and made the tough decisions. To see their precious pooled resources being used to pay for a service that was fundamentally redundant in a plural family was a profound betrayal of the economic partnership she had signed up for. It was a misuse of the funds she had worked so hard to earn. Her expression was one of quiet, simmering fury, the look of a business partner who has just discovered they've been embezzled from, not by a stranger, but by their own family. For Christine, the wound was even deeper and more personal. Her entire identity in the family was built on her role as the mother, the caregiver, the heart of the home. The existence of the nanny was a declaration that she had failed, that her contribution was worthless. Kody and Robyn's sputtering, nonsensical defense was not an explanation, it was an insult. It was a confirmation that they didn't even see the inherent hypocrisy in their actions. They didn't understand, or simply didn't care, how deeply this would wound the woman who had sacrificed her youth to raise their collective family. At that moment, Christine realized that she had been dedicating her life to a family that had, in a very real sense, outsourced her. They had taken her most sacred role, the very essence of her contribution to the principle, and had put a price tag on it and then given the job to a stranger. The sisterhood, the foundational promise of plural marriage, was a lie. And as Kody and Robyn continued to deflect and deny, Christine's expression shifted from pain to a quiet, firm resolve. The gaslighting wasn't working anymore. The king and queen had been exposed, and their reign over her life was coming to an end. The invisible fifth wife had done more than just watch the kids. She had held up a mirror to the family, and the reflection was ugly, distorted, and beyond repair. The aftermath of the nanny confrontation was not a slow burn, it was a detonation. The weak defenses and enraged denials offered by Kody and Robyn were not a salve on the wound, they were salt, grinding into the raw, exposed nerves of a family that had been bleeding internally for years. For Christine, the nanny scandal was the final, unforgivable betrayal. It was the point of no return. This wasn't just another argument or a temporary disagreement. It was a fundamental realignment of her reality. The life she had signed up for, the covenant she had made, had been rendered a fraud. The scandal positioned itself as the primary catalyst, the direct and undeniable cause of her decision to leave a spiritual union of more than 25 years. It irrevocably broke the concept of the sisterhood because it proved, in the most practical and insulting way possible, that Robyn was not a partner. She was a privileged wife living a separate, more luxurious and more supported life, a life that Christine and Janelle's sacrifices were funding. Christine's departure was not a rash decision made in the heat of the moment. It was the logical conclusion of a truth that the nanny had laid bare. The family she had been killing herself for no longer existed, if it ever truly had in the way she believed. The dream she had been sold as a naive young woman of a grand, unified patriarchal family with a loving husband at its center and a band of supportive sister wives working together had died. In its place was a stark, ugly hierarchy where she was a lesser queen, a servant to the main queen, expected to provide labor and loyalty without receiving the same in return. The nanny was the living, breathing proof that Christine's role as the homemaker and primary nurturer was not only unappreciated but was considered replaceable. And not just replaceable, but replaceable by a paid stranger. How could she continue to sacrifice for a family that had outsourced her most fundamental purpose? How could she pour her love and energy into raising Robyn's children when Robyn herself, with the full backing of their shared husband, had hired someone else for the job? The decision to leave became a matter of self-preservation. To stay would be to accept this new, diminished role. It would be to tacitly agree that she was less than. The invisible fifth wife didn't just do the childcare. She held up a mirror to Christine, forcing her to see the truth of her situation. And what Christine saw was a woman who was being used, a woman whose love was being taken for granted, and a woman who was no longer willing to set herself on fire to keep others warm. The final conversations with Kody, where he admitted he was no longer attracted to her and had no interest in a full marriage, were merely the nails in a coffin that the nanny scandal had already built. She wasn't just leaving Kody. She was leaving the lie. She was walking away from a system that had been exposed as a sham, a system where the rules were arbitrary and the rewards were distributed with blatant favoritism. For Janelle, the pragmatic and independent wife, the nanny scandal was a different kind of betrayal, but no less profound. While Christine's pain was deeply personal and emotional, Janelle's was rooted in logic, fairness, and finances. She was the one who had always worked, who had brought a steady income into the family, who had lived in trailers and sacrificed her own comfort for the sake of the family's financial stability. The discovery that their pooled money, her money, was being spent on a nanny for the one wife who didn't work outside the home was a profound financial and philosophical insult. It violated the core principle of their economic partnership. The money was supposed to be for the collective good, for mortgages on properties for all the wives, for the needs of all the children. Instead, it was being used to fund a lifestyle for Kody and Robyn that was completely unattainable for the rest of them. This financial betrayal was compounded by the hypocrisy it revealed. Kody had been relentlessly pressuring Janelle to kick out her adult sons, Garrison and Gabriel, for not adhering to his strict COVID rules, even suggesting she choose him over her own children. The revelation that the nanny and her husband were allowed to come and go from Robyn's house while her sons were being ostracized was the ultimate slap in the face. It proved that Kody's concern was never about health. It was about obedience. He was willing to risk the virus for the convenience of a paid employee, but not for a relationship with his own sons. This was a light bulb moment for Janelle. It validated her son's frustrations and exposed Kody's leadership not as protective but as tyrannical and self-serving. The seeds of Janelle's own departure were sown in the fertile ground of this hypocrisy. She began to see that the family she had invested her life and her finances in was a bad investment, a sinking ship where the captain and his favorite first mate were hoarding the lifeboats for themselves. Even for Mary, who had been emotionally estranged from Kody for years, the nanny scandal was a final confirmation of her complete and utter irrelevance. She had been begging for Kody's attention, for a crumb of affection or acknowledgement for the better part of a decade. To see him and Robyn not only living as a functional monogamous couple, but also using family resources to hire help to make their lives even easier, must have been a bitter pill to swallow. It underscored the fact that the family's resources, both financial and emotional, were entirely consolidated around Robyn. There was nothing left for anyone else. In the end, the invisible fifth wife did what none of the other wives could. She exposed the lie at the very heart of the Brown family. The family didn't collapse because polygamy is inherently unworkable. It collapsed because they had stopped practicing it. In its place, they had substituted a monarchy, a system where one wife was a queen and the others were her subjects. Robyn, whether intentionally or not, had achieved what no other wife had: a practically monogamous marriage with the financial benefits of a polygamous collective. She had the husband's time, affection, and presence. She had the nicest house. And, as the nanny proved, she had the support staff to make her life comfortable, all while the other wives were expected to fend for themselves. The nanny wasn't a homewrecker. She was a symptom of a disease that had been ravaging the family for years: inequity. She was the physical manifestation of Kody's favoritism and the symbol of a sisterhood that had become a farce. Her paycheck was paid by the collective, but her services were rendered to the crown, and in doing so, she unwittingly became the most consequential figure in the family's downfall. She exposed the secret monogamous monarchy that had been ruling from the shadows, and in doing so, she brought the entire house of cards crashing down. The Brown family saga, as the world knew it, was over, and it was all brought to light by the woman no one was ever supposed to see. The ghost in the machine, the invisible fifth wife who, by simply doing her job, revealed the truth and ended an empire.